you everybody who has joined so far and those who are continuing to join for joining us and making time to connect with us today on this beautiful November day. Today we're really excited to host World Usability Day again for Philadelphia, and to those people extended throughout Pennsylvania, the country, and the world. For anyone who doesn't know, World Usability Day, I say again because it's been an event that we've done officially since 2005. So it's a single day of worldwide events that bring together communities for one common objective, and that objective is to ensure that the services and products important to life are easier to access and simpler to use. So this year's theme, each year there's a theme, this year is Design of Our Online World, Trust, Ethics, and Integrity. So we're really excited to hear from our three speakers tonight who are going to share their work related to this topic. You can go forward, Raeesha.
Okay. Something is stuck.
Oh no, technical difficulties.
Yeah. Okay.
There we go. So we just want to go over some webinar logistics really quickly, even though by this point in our COVID timelines, I feel like it's old hat. You will be muted by default and your video will be off by default. So don't be alarmed if that has happened to you. You can use the chat for general questions or comments that you have. And as Ben mentioned, when some of you guys had first connected and we're sharing where you're from, it defaults to just send to the panelists. So make sure you change that to send to everyone if you have something that you want to share with everyone. You can use the Q&A feature if you have questions for the speaker. So we'll be monitoring that as well. So feel free to ask questions in there. Zoom has a closed caption feature, which has been enabled. So you can turn that on if you would like to. And lastly, this event will be recorded and shared online. So by participating, you are giving consent for that recording, and it'll be here for future viewings if you want. And as we already saw, thank you for patience with technical difficulties. We are still getting used to this stuff. I want to share a little bit about who we are for those of you who don't know. So we are PhillyCHI. We are an interdisciplinary group of UX designers mostly, so human interaction designers. We're the local chapter of ACM SIG-CHI, which has been curating, networking, and educational events for professional students and enthusiasts for over 15 years. So we're really dedicated to sharing knowledge of UX, and we really couldn't do this without you guys all spending your time with us at these events every month. So thank you for really making this possible. Also, we are committed to supporting a respectful environment for our members to come together and talk about UX. So if you see any unacceptable behavior during tonight's event or experience any unacceptable behavior, please make sure that let one of our board members know. And you can reach out to us in the chat. All of us have PhillyCHI next to our names. And we encourage everybody to read our code of conduct on our website if you're unfamiliar, and just check out the website in general to learn more about us. I'm going to pass it on to Raeesha to talk about the board.
PhillyCHI is led by this board of volunteers who you'll meet throughout the event. So there are 4 of us on the 2021 board. Ben Swofford, who is the chair. Remi is the vice chair. Benjamin Dolly is the treasurer. Unfortunately, he is not here today, but you'll definitely catch him in the next event. And I am the secretary. Moving on to tonight's schedule, at 6:45 we'll start the presentation, and each presentation will be followed by a short Q&A. And at the end of the night, we will announce the raffle winners, so do stick around. Tonight's raffle prizes, they are sponsored by Rosenfeld, and these are the 3 books. And as I mentioned, winners will be announced at the end of the call. We'll also reach out after the events to collect your addresses so that we can send you the physical copy of the book. Oops, sorry. For those of you joining a PhillyCHI event for the first time, we have job time at every event to connect job seekers with companies that are hiring. Since we are a local chapter, so we only focus on Philadelphia roles. So let's start with people or companies that are hiring. If you are a part of a Philly-based company and you have any roles open, please drop a link to the job description in the chat. And we also invite you to raise your hand so we can unmute you and you can briefly explain what your company does and what role you are looking to fill. Since I can't see if Ben or Remi, if you can see any hand raised, please.
Yeah, we have a hand raised from John. I will invite you to unmute. You there, John?
Can you hear me?
Yes. Hey.
Great. Hi, this is John Prussell from eMoney Advisor. We're based in Radnor, Pennsylvania, and just outside of Philadelphia. And we are looking for a couple of senior UX designers and a director of design systems to join our team right now. During the next year, we'll also be hiring a number of UX designers and researchers, so keep a lookout for that. But I'll post the link to our job vite in the chat.
Thank you.
Thanks, John.
Is there anyone else?
Nobody with a hand raised.
One with the hand
currently.
raised. It looks like EY Design Studio is hiring as well. That was posted in the chat just to call it out for anyone who may miss it. With a
But
link.
we do have, thanks, Remi. We do have one person with a hand up. Ryan, I will invite you to unmute.
Hey, what's up? Yeah, I posted that link. I'm not entirely sure if we're still hiring, but I know the openings are available on the website. So if you have any questions, feel free to reach out. I'll drop my email in there as well.
Okay, thank you, Ryan. Anyone else? Ben?
Nope, that's it.
Okay,
You just
so moving
mentioned,
on. Yeah,
oh,
sorry, go on.
Bhumi is hiring as well. In fact, we're looking for a senior UX designer for my team API management. So if Bhumi interests you, have a look, please. Thank you.
Okay, I think there's another hand raised by Akhil.
All right, Akhil, you should be able to talk. If you're there. It looks like you might be muted. Okay, we might be having technical difficulties with Akhil.
Okay, so then I'll move on to the job seekers. If you're looking for a job right now, please feel free to reach out to these individuals who have shared their open roles tonight. And also, if you feel like you can drop your LinkedIn profile in the chat. I'll pass it on to Ben now.
Okay, awesome. Thanks, Raeesha. Hi, everyone. So want to give a big shout out to our sponsors who make PhillyCHI events possible. This year, our annual sponsors include all of these awesome organizations here: Think Company, O3 World, Rosenfeld Media, Vanguard, Blue Plate Mines, and the Drexel University College of Computing and Informatics. So thank you all so much. And a special thank you to our event sponsor tonight, which is Breslau Group and Delve. We have Ken with us, who will explain why there's two names there, I'm sure, and tell you a little bit about what's going on over there.
Thanks, Ben. Yeah, Breslau Group and Delve is a recently merged product design and innovation consulting firm. Breslau Group is historically based out of downtown Philadelphia. We're right near the Reading Market Terminal, have a big team there, and are combining with Delve, which has offices in Boston, San Francisco, and Madison, Wisconsin. So the merger means we've effectively doubled in size and capacity. We have multiple locations. We're growing rapidly and looking for people really all over the United States to join us, including some fully remote positions. So we are actively hiring for over a dozen positions in a variety of groups, including some design, engineering, and project management positions. So I'll make sure to post a link in the chat in case people are curious to check that out. Really just want to thank the PhillyCHI board for organizing and hosting this great event and participating yet again in World Usability Day. It's kind of near and dear to our hearts, we really think about design as an opportunity to improve the human condition and make life better for everybody. And usability is at the center of all of that. So just want to say thank you, and thank you to the speakers. Really looking forward to hearing from you tonight.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Ken. Really appreciate your support. And I think we've partnered with Bressler Group on World Usability Day a number of times. So it's great to have you back. All right. I think we can advance to the next slide.
Okay.
So it's working there, Raeesha. Cool. Thanks. All right. So it's that time of year when PhillyCHI, we start thinking about transitions to the team that's going to lead us through the next year. We typically kind of pass the baton the calendar year, and this is actually something that I've really grown to appreciate as something that makes PhillyCHI it's one of our keys to success, is that we bring on new people and keep the energy going from year to year. It's a bit of a bittersweet moment for me because I've decided to pass on the reins as chair and step back next year. So I just wanted to take a brief moment and thank everyone, especially my team on the PhillyCHI board, for the opportunity to lead and grow with you all. Really proud of the work we've done over the past 2 years, getting us through COVID and transitioning into this virtual environment. I'm very excited to share that our current treasurer, Ben Dolly, is going to be stepping into the chair role next year, and really confident it's in good hands with him. And also I'm super thrilled to share that both Remi and Raeesha will be staying on the board. So that means we will be looking for at least 2 new people next year. Raeesha is going to be focusing on social media. So the secretary role and the treasurer role will both be available. We'll be posting more details about that next week. So please do keep an eye out for that. It's about a 1-year commitment. I'll have all the details, and we'll also be looking for volunteers for people who might not be able to commit to a board position. Cool. So I think we can go to the next slide there. If I undersold it at all, I should say it's a very cool opportunity, and I've personally benefited a lot from being on the board. So if you're at all interested, please get in touch or let us know if you have questions. Briefly, I just want to mention we'll be sending out an annual survey as well, along with that call for board applicants. This is really helpful to our team. We've benefited greatly from it in the past. It's really helped this year as we've kind of made a few adjustments to how we handle virtual events. So keep an eye out for that. And we really value your impact, your opinions and your feedback. And a final note is that we do have our last and final event, and I'm very excited to share that we'll be hosting our first in-person gathering next month. This will be the first in-person event we've done since January of 2020. This is the holiday happy hour. This has been a tradition for PhillyCHI that we had to skip last year for obvious reasons. But we felt it was a good time to do it again. We have an awesome space reserved at Urban Village in the Northern Liberties neighborhood here in Philadelphia. For everyone's safety and comfort, we will be requiring proof of vaccination to attend. And this is the only event that I know of that we do at PhillyCHI where we do charge a little bit to recoup some of our expenses. We will have an early bird discount, so keep an eye out on that for that. And I think we're going to try to send it to everyone who's attended this event, so you get a jump on that as well. So appreciate you showing up, and we can't wait to mix and mingle and network and kind of toast to the new year coming up. So really looking forward to that. Cool. And with that, I will pass it to Remi to get us started with tonight's activities.
Yes. So tonight we have 3 wonderful speakers for you. The first is Rahul Agarwal, who's the technical product manager at Boomi, and he's going to be talking about the role of ethics in product-led growth. After him up, we have Dan Singer, who is the product researcher at Stack Overflow, and he will be talking about crafting remote co-creation research design for belonging. And then our final speaker is Christene Fair, who's a UX designer at Backlot Cars, and she also is a digital media instructor at Northeastern University, and she will be talking about escaping the bad design echo chamber. So we are going to pass it over to Rahul to kick it off.
Thank you. Can you confirm if you can see my screen, please?
Yeah, you're good, Rahul.
Well, so as Remi mentioned, I'm here to talk about role of ethics in product-led growth. And in the next 15 to 20 minutes, I will talk about why ethics is important. What do we mean by ethics? And then most of the presentation would be how to incorporate ethics in product-led growth. But before we start, let me provide you context on why am I eligible to speak on this topic. And the answer is that I've been doing product-led growth for over a decade in these different companies all around the world, from B2C e-commerce to B2C on-demand, and currently API management platform at Boomi, which has a global footprint. And through my learnings and through my experience here, I'm going to share how to think and work with ethics around product-led growth. So let's look at the why. Why do we need to think about product-led growth and ethics in it? And I think the best way to see is that let's see what is happening in the market so that we are all grounded in reality as we move forward. And the two culprits which really come to the fore are in front of you. These companies are product-led growth by definition, which we all know. They do product-led growth very well, but the consequences and the ethics are highly questionable. We all know the data privacy concerns with Facebook and the way it is leading teenagers to addiction. We know the bad working conditions at the warehouses in Amazon. But these two are not only the only examples. We have others. We have others as well, such as DoorDash. DoorDash is an excellent product-led growth company as well, but do you know that they were not paying the tips to their workers for almost a year? And then Theranos, a company which led with growth. The growth was all around it, but as we all got to know that it was a fraud at the end of the day. So just kind of letting you know what's happening in the world and why we need to think about ethics. And let's go to our beloved tech company, Google. Now, what you see on the left is a controversial result from the Google open source machine learning model called BERT. As you can see, there's a questionable gender stereotype, which is part of the open source BERT model. And this is the state of AI right now in the world, is that if the majority of the world in the coming years will use pre-built models, which is going to pose a huge risk on any product we will build with these models. And accountability is hard to get because people who are making voices in big tech these days are getting penalized. So what you see here is the ethical officer at Google had to leave, and all of this information is out because of a startup called Hugging Face, which is leading ethical treatment of AI models. So we looked at how big tech and product-led growth companies are kind of losing the ball on ethics and integrity, which brings me to the what. So let's look at what do we mean by definition by ethics. And I took this from Britannica, and it talks about ethics being a moral philosophy. It talks about good and bad. It talks about right and wrong, and it talks about values and principles to make sure that we are doing the good or the bad and the right and the wrong. That's what ethics is defined in dictionary, so that we know now this is what it means. Let's see how we can apply it. And for that, I have this framework, which is three-faceted, as you could see. It has the customer on the top, usage, and then employees. Because we looked at how why ethics is a problem, but now let's look at why, how should we even think about bringing ethics into product-led growth. So first, let's talk about customer. And the first step here, which I want to explain, is that the main point is that product-led growth itself is ethical in nature. And what do I mean by that? There are two principles I would want to mention here, is that so Remi mentioned technical difficulties in the beginning. So this is one technical difficulty. So there are two aspects to customer. I don't have that slide coming up, but I'll speak about it. It is user and revenue. So what do you mean by product-led growth is that it's difficult to be the customer in the room or the user in the room, because usage matters the most. And right now, engineering wants to build something, leaders want to build something, but how to be data oriented and how to be how to bring user in the room is very important for us to work on any product development out there. So just sticking to the principles, sticking to being data driven, sticking to the voice of the user or the customer is ethical in itself to talk about product-led growth. And secondly is revenue. So especially in enterprise, you see so many strategies driven by sales and by what sells, but the question should be what is used. You don't want to create shelfware for just because it gets sold. That's not the purpose of product developers and designers and engineers such as us. We need to make sure that we build products that are used by the customers, and if they sell, that's great for the business, but it should not be the other way around. So that's why it's on top of the pyramid. It is lightweight. It is easy to understand that, yes, being the customer in the room helps us think about principles and models. And it's difficult to implement these as we think of product-led growth. So now the question would be is that what are the other two? If product-led growth itself is ethical, then we should all go home and be happy and then start building products. We know everything we need to do. But then before we go into usage and employees, the next two layers of this framework, which can help you implement ethics, we need to look at something which is happening in the world. That is yes. So this is something which we need to look at before we go on to the next two pillars of ethics, and that slavery is an industry which is still dominant in the world. What you're looking here is the global modern slavery index. And you can see almost every country on this map is in the green layer of vulnerability. Why I'm showing you this slide is because just because of the result of information age, everyone here is more informed. And with information comes more visibility. And this is the visibility we are getting into how much slavery is still prevalent in the world right now. And the definition of slavery has evolved over centuries. Right now, lack of basic needs, lack of equality, lack of access to basic things, and being in conflict, all of these make you consider a modern slave. So if the definition of slavery has changed and information age is here, and all of us are using technology to create mega tools, then why should we stick with an old or antiquated definition of ethics? And that is why I present to you a more practical way of thinking about ethics that catches the eye, so that it becomes a priority in rooms when we are talking about product development, rather than something as an afterthought. So what ethics in this new world actually is how much slavery can you tolerate? And the principles that you want to abide by are how to prevent society from enabling, aiding, and profiting from inequality. The money which you're making from a product, how much of it is actually blood money? Now, if you start thinking ethics from this angle, you have no choice but to bring ethics, integrity, priority in your product development. And with this, I think we are prepared to look into the next layer of the model, which is usage. So product-led growth says that usage matters the most, just make sure your product is being used. But we looked at the negative examples before, like Facebook, Amazon, and DoorDash. And that is why we need to have checks and balances in usage. And there are these 5 kinds of checks and balances which you can implement, starting from whether your product is addictive, privacy, social responsibility, sustainability, and accessibility. In the time today, I will try to give you some insight into the first 2, and maybe in some future talk, I can go into details on all 5 of these. But let's look at these 2 for now. And what do I mean by checks and balances is that as designers, as product developers, how do we make these ethical choices early? And we have all looked at the hooked model and the flywheel model and all these product-led growth models out there, but they essentially are dark patterns. We don't want to be tobacco and cola companies. We need to be more cognizant on why are we using a growth model if it is leading the user to addiction. So do you want to be the tobacco company of 2021 by following a flywheel or a hooked model? So that is what I'm trying to say, is that this is a check and balance you need to make very early in your product development so that your user is not addicted. And privacy as well. Privacy shouldn't be an afterthought, it should be by design. How proactive you can bring privacy as part of your product design. How user-centric can you be with privacy? What aspects of a product require privacy from a user aspect, rather than building the product, launching, and then a customer calls you, why my data is there, then you're thinking about privacy, it's too late. And lastly, transparent. Collect data for automation and intelligence, but tell me on my face, this is the data I'm collecting and this is the aspect I will give you in terms of convenience. So the customer or the user knows pretty well, this is what they're getting. So just to give you a flavor of how to think about checks and balances with the new definition of ethics that I provided to you. With this, let's look at the last pillar of the model, which consumes most of the attention because that's why it is the broadest and the largest aspect of this framework, which is employees. What do I mean by employees? I mean personal commitment. And training on ethics or hiring a chief ethics officer or an ethical division in the company will not make much difference. And that is why implementing ethics is very difficult, because it needs personal commitment. And there are 2 facets of personal commitment. On your left is the aspect of personal character, and on your right is the aspect of building culture as leaders and as team members. How do you bring that character as an extension to the ecosystem and the community that you belong to? And under each, both of these are different tenets, which I have provided here as kind of framework for you to think about and talk about and implement ethics in your own organizations. You have purpose, courage, skepticism, morality, and empathy, which helps build character. And you have diversity, mission, trust, mental health, and the right org structure to implement the right culture. Now, in the interest of time, I will not go in detail in each of these tenets, but I will definitely try to give you a flavor of 2 of them, so that you can, after this talk, go and start implementing and start being practical about these things. And the two which I've picked for today's talk in the last employee aspect of the model are these two: diversity and mental health. Making sure that there are different opinions and backgrounds in your team and in your company, that will really help ensure that the product that you're rolling out is inherently ethical. Because if only a homogeneous group of people is building a product, you will see what happened with that BERT model, which I showed you in the beginning. And the companies I've worked with have embraced diversity, and I see the actual result of having a diverse team. And secondly, most of us are knowledge workers, and time management and mental health are top of the mind. And unless you are clearly thinking in the present, how would you be leaders in such sensitive issues, especially when you are the harbingers of technology and you are the one democratizing technology in the world? So that's what I had to present. I provided you a framework in terms of thinking about the customer, thinking about the type of usage, and then personal commitment, adding the gravity to the framework, and also presented to you what's the new definition of slavery in the world and how it affects almost all the products that we use and make. So with that, I come to the end of my presentation. I would encourage you to look at Mind the Product. I think they have great resources, and they have great resources on ethics and product development as well for you to check out. I really thank PhillyCHI for giving me this opportunity to share my thoughts and also learn from other like-minded people. And lastly, this is my website. You can reach out to me if you want to review any of these topics which I've listed out. And lastly, Bhumi is hiring senior UX people. So if you're interested to join the team, please let us know. Thank you.
All right, we are going to open the floor up for questions. So if you have a question for Rahul, if you want to speak, you can raise your hand. If you want to throw it in the chat, you are welcome to do so. We have in the chat, could you give an example of modern slavery? What you mean by that?
So I would take the example, there are many examples there. So disenfranchisement is one. I can think the Modern Slavery Index. If you go to globalmodernslaveryindex.org, they provide you a framework on how they come up with this index. And just in the US, if you are not a citizen, and there are so many undocumented immigrants, there are even immigrants which don't have citizenship status, they fall into some definition of modern slavery. And just poverty. If a person is poor and is not able to have the right drinking water or the basic amenities, that is considered as modern slavery. If your government doesn't provide you the bare minimum and in fact takes advantage of you as a human being, that's modern slavery. If your clothes and fashion industry, all of it is being manufactured by child laborers in a different country, and you are in a developed country using those substances or products, you are in fact a consumer of modern slavery.
Awesome. I hope that answered your question, Dolma. If not, feel free to let us know and we can explore that further. We hear it has answered the question. Anything else? Anyone else have any questions for what Rahul? Well, we've got him.
I just want to say why it applies to us is that if you are a user of Facebook and Facebook is monetizing your data, then you are a modern slave as well. That's the crux of the presentation today. So as UX designers, as product managers, where do you draw a line? So Christine wants me to go to which one?
The slide with all of the tenants on it.
The employee, this one, yes.
Yes,
So Jess mentions, can you elaborate on the last comment about Facebook? Yeah, so I'm saying that if you are a parent and you have a teenage daughter who is addicted to Instagram, now as a Facebook product manager, you are implementing modern slavery because you're using the hours of a teenage girl just to make sure that your engagement metrics go down the roof and you get the advertisement revenue which you've been craving for. Similarly, Amazon, you get your one-day delivery, but if somebody has to pee in a bottle in a warehouse, that's modern slavery. DoorDash, you get your food in 1 hour, but the tip which you give goes to the CEO's pocket and not the person who waited 20 minutes to get that pizza for you. That's modern slavery. So everything we touch and we do and we implement has blood money there. So the ethics right now is that how much blood money can you tolerate? Please ask questions or unmute yourself if this is something which is not making sense to you, but that's why it is important for us to talk about these topics.
For sure, definitely. Jess said thank you. All right, does anybody else have any other questions? We want to make sure you get a chance.
So Dolma, DoorDash, they are not doing it right now. So I was an early user of DoorDash. I live in San Francisco. And what they did was that if you tip on the order, let's say you tip 20% on the order, that money was not going to the driver. That money was being taken up by DoorDash itself. And then somebody sued them. What are you doing? And then they made a product change. They said it was a product problem. We didn't know this was happening. And for 1 year or more than 1 or 2 years, all the tip money was going to the CEO and not to the drivers. So if you go to DoorDash right now on their checkout page, I think they mention explicitly the tip money is going to the driver. They made that change after they got sued or this came into the public. So all this while I've been ordering a pizza and I've been giving the tip to the driver, it was going to the CEO. But they are product-led growth. They are like VC funded. They are the poster boys of San Francisco. And that's what's happening.
Dolma said thank you for explaining in detail.
So it's, can I answer questions or I don't want to eat into the next person's time?
Yeah, so we have a question in the Q&A. Do you think that there is a possible future where the amount of modern slavery can be zero?
That's why I thought very hard about providing that new definition, and that I think as leaders in the technology space, all of us need to bring that to as minimum as possible. But you looked at that graphic, you can go right now on that website and see the prevalence is so dominant that I don't think that it would go zero in at least a century.
Mm-hmm. All right, and then a follow-up to that, Sarah also wants to know what are some of the actions that you can do to reduce the percentage of modern slavery?
I would come to this. I think this is the slide which I would say would help us bring that thing down. It's personal commitment at the end of the day. It's things like the character, which I didn't have time to go into each one of them. I can talk about a lot about purpose, courage, skepticism. Let's talk about skepticism. If you're an employee in a company and you see something happening, not being skeptic is the first sign of that you are ignorant. So that is one thing you can do to reduce modern slavery. Culture, for example, I mentioned diversity and mental health. If your company invests in your mind and making you think clearly and also invest in having a different person right next to you providing opinion. These are the small things which will help us move into a direction where we can have a better world.
Wonderful. Thank you. And for the sake of time, I think we're going to move on to the next speaker. I encourage everyone to keep up your questions to Rahul in the chat and keep this discussion going. So I will pass it on over to Dan. Take it away.
Thank you. And thank you to Rahul for that super fascinating, really thought-provoking presentation. And what I'm going to talk about today is a little, this is more of a case study, it's closer to the ground. I'm going to be talking about co-creation as a way to act on some of those positive impulses that we have, right? The ways in which that we would like to design ethically, design with our users in mind. So I'm going to be talking about how we created a co-creation as a research method. We didn't invent it, how we applied co-creation research at Stack Overflow for a particular project to really look into community belonging. I also want to note that this was co-authored by Mithila Fox, who is in Australia time. I think it's very early for her right now, but she helped me create this presentation. If you are not familiar with Stack Overflow, if you're someone who has ever tried to figure out how to center a div in HTML because you really are trying to push yourself further, like me, you've probably ended up on Stack Overflow frantically trying to understand what you've done wrong. Thankfully, I've given up that and let other people center divs instead of me. It was founded in 2008. It's been built for many, many years by developers, for developers. In the recent years, it has, we've added more roles. And at its core, it is a question and answer site. People go and ask a question about how to do something with code, and then experts answer that. People can vote up responses, vote down responses in order to sort of have that crowdsourced answer, right? Theoretically, the things that have the highest upvotes are the best. Things that have the lowest downvotes or the most downvotes are not worth people's time. But what we found over the course of many years is that that's not necessarily what works best for everyone. There are a lot of people who want to participate in the site, for example, who can't, or because perhaps they're not fast enough to get the best answer, right? They're not, they don't speak English as a first language and don't feel like they have the skills to write a really great answer that's going to get them the most points, that's going to help them earn more privileges on the site. So this sort of core feature of Stack Overflow, the idea that earning reputation for your contributions allows you to do more on the site, was challenged by the fact that some people don't really have a path to that. And so we're always looking for new ways for people to participate on the site beyond that typical question and answer, right? We want to look for ways for people to get involved and feel like they're a part of this community. And so we asked a couple of questions at the beginning of this year with one of our product teams. We asked, what might it mean to build knowledge on our platform outside of the Q&A format? So again, looking at those sort of different ways to participate. We looked at how we might be able to bring people together based on their common technical interests. And we sort of asked, are there deeper ways for people to engage or ways for more people to contribute? So go broader or go deeper in the ways that people can share content on the site. As you notice, these questions are really, really open-ended. These are broad research questions. They are quite fluffy, so they don't have really discrete, easy to answer, solutions. And so we try to think of methods that we could use to really explore this space effectively. And so we came towards co-creation as a solution, and co-creation is really rising as a movement in design, especially for people who are focused on ethics in design. It is about bringing the people who consume your products in with you into the design process. And we decided to use that as a research method where we could sort of learn about some of the things that that those people value. Typically, we would do this, we would get everyone into a room similar to what you might see in workshops or something in your professional life. Get everyone into a room, have a whiteboard or a lot of sticky notes, have donuts, et cetera, et cetera. But we are completely remote. Our users are all around the world. And so having that sort of thing also, pandemic. So all of those pieces together meant we were doing remote research. And so we decided to figure out the best way to design this project where we would ask really specific kind of questions that would get at these really open-ended topics in a way that people felt safe to contribute. And so co-creation can be a useful research design for exploring connections between ideas, right? Whereas a typical research interview that we might be familiar with, where we're going down a discussion guide and asking people questions, can be pretty directed, right? We as researchers are narrating the flow of ideas for our participants, right? I'm moving down my script, and even if I vary that script a little bit, I am still sort of like moving down my direction in a pretty fixed amount of time, right? I know I have 45 minutes and I have to get through the script. Well, when we talk about co-creation and we talk about opening up that space a little bit, it allows our participants, who really become our allies in this process, it allows them to actually direct the conversation a little more. We're ceding control of that research interview from completely in our control to sharing it with them. It's a space that's really can be uncomfortable. It takes a lot of stretching for us as researchers to open ourselves up to that. It's really vulnerable. It takes a lot of preparation for this, and I'm going to go into some of that preparation and creation today. To talk through that. It's as a researcher, it is uncomfortable for me. It is something that really ditches our scripts and really asks us to be active listeners, active probers, and cultivate a conversation. We're much more exposed, and I'll sort of show you what I mean there. And it's really humbling, right? We're saying you're the experts here, right? We're translators at best, and we're trying to help you express what you need to express. So today I want to talk about how we approach those challenges. When we talk about using Miro, we are certainly in a space that not everyone uses. Miro, for those who don't know, is an online whiteboard. You might have used similar things like Mural. Figma has something similar to that right now called FigJam. It's M-I-R-O is Miro. It's a shared space. It's pretty easy to manipulate, but we couldn't just expect people to come in knowing how to use Miro. And so we started with everyone's favorite, an icebreaker, but we tried to make it fun. And so we adapted this template that Miro had called Monster Workshop. And what we did was we had everyone take a little bit of time and take pieces of these like shapes that we had, bring them all together in a shared space and create a little monster, just in a couple minutes, and then talk about their monster that they created. The reason we do this is, one, it's like very silly. There's no stakes. We're not asking people what they're doing for Thanksgiving, where you might get on like sort of sensitive family topics or something like that. It's just really, really low stakes. Get in here, create. It tells you this Miro board, the shared whiteboard that we're in, is your space too, right? You can do whatever you want here. It's not precious. We're not making wild stuff. We're not doing, this is not like some kind of movie where we've got holograms all over the place. It's very straightforward. This is the process. It's very transparent. And I just thought it was fun. The designer who worked with this, who was in all these sessions with me, we compiled our monsters over the course of our 6 co-creation sessions. I think like mine got sadder. Like I think they got more sad. And her and Vivian's, they really started getting extremely surreal. Both of these are very educational. Anyway, we came into Miro and we said, okay, we're not just going to be able to throw you into Miro and you're going to start making all these great ideas, right? That's not what we expected. And so what we did was began to prime our group. As designers, we're more comfortable with having that blank page and starting to fill that. But for people who aren't familiar with this, we need to kind of get them into the right mindset. We need to help build that mindset. And so we didn't just go into designing, we started just having a little bit of a guided conversation. This is very similar to what a typical design research session goes. We had a couple questions. What kind of communities are you a part of? What makes those communities special? What makes them safe? What makes them comfortable? What would you change about those communities? And we had a group of 2 or 3 people in these. And so they were starting to bounce things off of each other. We were talking about very known items. We were talking about very known facets. And so it was easy to talk about these things. We did sort of group them. We grouped these users by similar similar experience level as a developer, similar activities, that kind of stuff, so that they would have some connections on those things. And from that brainstorming, we moved them into that design space. And what that looked like was really just like sticking boxes on the Miro, just like making an empty box, just starting, right? Just putting that box and saying, our job is to make a positive community where we learn and build knowledge, right? That's the challenge we put out in front of them. Did very little else. And we said, okay, thinking about those communities that you were just talking about, those communities that's really positive about them, let's take some of those positive aspects and put them in our space. This isn't meant to be this super beautiful, polished thing. And so very quickly, Vivian and I were in there, putting little lines places and asking people to design over here. It wasn't we're making this very polished thing. We were putting sticky notes everywhere. It was just getting our ideas down onto this Miro space. And the value of that was instant feedback, right? None of this is polished UI, but we were able to put something down and immediately people can say, oh, that's not what I was talking about. Even if we make exactly what they say, sometimes they say, that's not what I'm talking about. And so it helps you to reflect that back immediately to them. Sometimes they would draw things themselves and the other people would sort of like come in and correct them. And so as we started getting to those more sensitive topics, what we're really trying to do, all of this preamble, is to craft a conversation. We're trying to build trust and build space for a little bit of vulnerability, right? Because what we're talking about here is belonging. It's an extremely vulnerable topic, especially because some of the folks we're researching with are developers who are underrepresented. And we sort of had a whole separate recruiting process to find them specifically, which is outside of the scope of this, but we were dealing with people who are underrepresented. And I chose the words crafting a conversation here really intentionally. This space that you're building as a researcher is owned by you. So you're responsible for it, but you're trying to share it and make sure other people feel like they can contribute to it and own it and have ownership in that space. And when we talk about a conversation, we're building that back and forth where we're learning from one another, right? So we're removing this hat where I'm the expert as the researcher, and I'm trying to extract information from you, this very extractive approach. And instead, I'm saying, we're partners in this. You and I are sharing things together. I'm reflecting things back to you and saying, oh, I've seen this on this Slack group or something like that. And they're able to learn from us. And it's a dialogue between us and those participants. We really all become co-creators in one co-creation soup, which is not a metaphor I want to take further, but you sort of get the idea. As we continued following some of these ideas, we got into some really interesting topics. This one I'll try to illustrate the best I can, kind of ignore the sticky note blahs over there. We have this little spot here, this little red dot next to the title of our thread, right? And this is typically on a Stack Overflow page. This is where the upvotes and the downvotes would be. This is where someone gets a score of 1,000 if it's very good, or -20 and it's going to get deleted, right? This is where people vote on this. And this person said those votes like they don't make this space that feels conducive to creativity and participation. And they said what they would want to see here is like a piece of abstract art, and that evolves, right? So instead of this up and down arrow with this numbered score, you have some kind of art here, and as you contribute to it, like your art changes and grows and evolves. And this is so cool, right? Like this is deeply interesting. It's not something that we can't just take that idea. That idea is not just like perfect for like, we can't just hand that to a developer, like go make this abstract art, right? But what it told us was that this person felt really uncomfortable in this space from this voting that really took over the whole Stack Overflow experience. And so we were able to dig into that and talk through a little bit about why that was interesting to them. I'm going to skip through this just for time's sake. But as we were beginning to synthesize all this information, we were finding what did our co-creators value, how they made those values manifest, right? How they made them real, that thing that they cared about, what it actually looked like to them. And most importantly, how it fit together. So when we talk about why we should employ co-creation, right, what that gives us is it develops a relationship and gains depth in an open-ended space, right? It deepens our relationship with our research participant. And in fact, we went back to those research participants and said, hey, we would love to talk to you again about these designs as they get more specific. And we did do that. And we had really great conversations, right? We're not treating them as just representative of all of our users, but as a person who we're learning from how they connect ideas to one another, right? The second point, see firsthand how they organize and prioritize, right? We're seeing how they jump. You know, when we have a normal conversation, we're jumping from point to point to point, right? I'm trying to keep that flowing as I have a conversation with you all today. But in a normal conversation, we're all over the place, and we get to see that in this space of creation, how people bounce back and forth and what ideas are related to them. And this third point here, priming the research and design process, is so significant because as designers and researchers going through this, it's not everything we did together over that week of co-creation sessions, hours and hours and hours. It didn't go into this research report where it's like, okay, we have these ideas we can work from, but it also put us in the mindset of what kinds of things are important. It helped prime us as we began to continued our research and design process of the things that were important to the people we were building for. It didn't all go smoothly. And I want to talk a little bit about what we learned. First, not all participants are eager to become co-creators. If I dropped everyone in this, who's attending this today, into a Miro board, we wouldn't just magically build these wonderful ideas together, right? Not everyone would feel comfortable going into that space. And so it's really important to learn from what your participants are doing, read the room, as it were. And you might have to take a little bit more of the driver's seat. You might have to start with some more drawing in that shared space to help them take over a little bit more. You might have to do a lot of the driving, or you might have to do none. So engaging them the right way, finding what they need is really important. So when I say this takes a lot of work, it's not just the preparation, but in that session yourself, you and your participants have to be really in tune, right? As alongside your team. And this last piece here is why this became so valuable, is we created the shared source of truth, right? So even if you're not a researcher, think about how you could apply this in your work, whether that's as a product manager, as a designer, or, you know, as a developer, whatever you do. Think about how you can kind of create these shared spaces and how you can share ownership of them, to just have a different way of thinking about similar problems. It's not necessarily this humongous radical change, but it's creating a seed of a different way of thinking about problems than we typically do. I am super thankful to you all for joining us today on this Wednesday evening. Thankful to the PhillyCHI team for putting such a great event together, and to my fellow co-presenters. If you want to get in touch with me, you can take down my email address, also my Twitter. You can feel free to reach out to me there. Otherwise, I'm happy to take any questions.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Dan. We already have one question in the Q&A section. Are co-creation and participatory design the same thing in this case?
That is a great question. I don't know the answer to that. because I think yes, is my guess. But I think it sounds like they're the same from the title. But if there is, I think co-creation really has a body of knowledge behind it, and I don't know that it's the same for what you said is participatory design. It might be. I just don't know the answer.
Yeah, I feel like that's a common thing in our field. We have many names for the same practices. So
yeah.
I think your answer
both sound fun.
Are there any other questions? Gonna give it a minute. What was difficult facilitating the co-creation session?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I think the total uncertainty, I always have a little, I mean, I've been researching for quite some time now. I've done dozens and dozens and dozens of sessions. And I always have like a little pit in my stomach when I go into a research session. I know other researchers feel the same way about that. This was like that times like 1,000, because it's like imagine that, but you've just given them an empty whiteboard and you have no idea how they're going to react. So I think it was, it's just a lot more anxiety going into it. But like having like a partner in my designer who was always there with me, we were able to sort of channel that anxiety into like productive energy, which is, but yeah, it leaves you feeling super drained afterwards for sure.
Wonderful. Yeah, I always say doing a research session like that is like doing a live performance.
Yeah, absolutely. And like speaking of that from the same vein, I think this is a good reminder for researchers who are watching this, is that it's exhausting for our participants too, just like you said. And letting them saying it's okay to turn off your video and step away if you ever need to step away for any reason, right? Especially in like today's situation, like extending that grace and saying like, if you need to go, just go for a second. It's okay. This is not life altering, it's okay. Is sort of a nice reminder for us as well.
For sure.
I'm super happy to, as other folks, if like this is something that you think about and say like, maybe this is something that I want to try at some point, feel free to reach out and we could like talk through it. I think this is like more practical knowledge than like easy to talk about in the abstract. So happy to talk more about it.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, Dan. Maybe post your info in the chat so folks can connect with you. I might get after you about that Miro intro. That's such a great icebreaker you have.
For sure. Thanks.
All right. Thank you so much. I'm going to pass it on to Christene Fair now. Take it away.
Hi, everyone. I've got to arrange all of my Zoom windows here. So thanks so much to the PhillyCHI team for putting this event together and taking part in World Usability Day, and also to Rahul and Ben for those amazing talks. That was really great. I think that's what's so sort of powerful about these events, is all of us getting together to share our experience and to learn from one another. And also thanks to all of you for showing up. I know after spending all day looking at a screen, it's really a great commitment to your craft to show back up on Zoom tonight. So thanks to all of you as well. I'm going to try to fit a lot into our 15 minutes. So we're going to talk about escaping the bad design echo chamber. And I also call this, just because you saw it on the internet doesn't mean it's good design. But what does that even mean? So this is a quick overview of what I'm going to go through tonight. And all of these points will be pretty brief, but I'm happy to answer questions or sort of elaborate at the end or clarify anything that I might have glossed over a little bit as I go through these. So first, we'll identify the echo chamber and talk about why it's bad. And then we'll address 4 questions that we can ask and have our teams ask to escape the bad design echo chamber. So pretty simple. All right, what's the bad design echo chamber? And first, we might need to know what is an echo chamber. Echo chambers are situations where beliefs or feelings are reinforced by communication and repetition inside of a closed system with no outside sources. So think of the internet as this closed system and the designs that exist there. So the UI patterns, the way folks implement copy and visual design, all of that is our echo chamber. So then why is that bad? I think many of today's UX designers are new to the field, and others of us are really overtaxed with multiple projects, or we're leashed by really short timelines. And sometimes we look online to quickly inform our design choices or to do a comparative study. And maybe we think that what the competitor is doing fits our own use case. Also, as the UX profession grows and demands on our teams increase, the tendency to just use designs without checking them for their potential success with our specific users becomes this self-perpetuating problem. And that's what I call the bad design echo chamber. So this echo chamber is really just reflecting the problems that come with social proofing designs instead of applying our UX skills, right? And I feel like we've all seen examples of this. And I'm not saying that it's bad to look for design inspiration online. I'm saying it's bad to repeat a design without doing a little bit of due diligence and a little bit of work. So let's take a step back and think about what we mean when we use terms like good design and bad design. Bad design is bad because it doesn't serve the users. It could be inaccessible. It might break our users' trust by going against mental models or best practices. It could follow dark patterns. It could exclude certain groups of people, or maybe it just doesn't really adhere to our team's design systems or isn't something that our team is capable of building. So there are so many ways that designs can be bad. A lot of times with design work, working with teams and with students, I say it's as if in design, there are wrong answers only, because when we get it right, folks might not even notice. So when we do get it right, when it's good design, what does that mean? Good design might be just anything that improves over what already existed. Hopefully, we're all in environments where we're practicing iterative design. And so we have opportunities to realize areas where we can improve the user experience within our products. And so that's good design when we do that. So sometimes when we say good design, we might just mean better design, as in it's better than what it was before. Good design is also going to be inclusive, accessible, and build trust with our users. Okay, so now we kind of have a sense of what the bad design echo chamber is and what bad design is and what good design is. So let's talk about why this bad design echo chamber is problematic. So the overall premise here is that there's bad design out there and that leveraging bad design for ideas to create new designs perpetuates more of the bad design. So why is that a problem? We know that there's bad design out there. What's a little bit more bad design if we meet our deadline, if our team hits their OKRs, right? Well, the problem is that the bad design isn't going to serve your users or your business. So I have an example that I'll use throughout this talk. And while I don't want to reveal what company this was, I've seen something similar to this at almost every organization I've worked with on at least one of their teams. So this was years ago. I was doing some work for a small e-commerce company, and we had a really very small product and development team. And there was one contract designer, and that was me. And before I got there, and to be fair, before most of that team got there, the product manager or the tech lead or most of those developers, the old team had given this website's navigation an overhaul. A few stakeholders got together and they looked around on the internet and they found this cool navigation and they used it. And it was cool in that it looked cool and it had some cool animation and the way the drop downs worked. And when you changed selections, it had this cool visual effect and it had some cool branding elements. But this fancy, cool navigation recycled from somewhere else on the internet didn't serve that business and it didn't serve the users. If you looked at it out of context of the website, as in if you just kind of saw that navigation floating out there and you didn't see the company information or products underneath it, you would have barely guessed that we were an e-commerce company and you wouldn't have known what we sold. You couldn't tab through the navigation options either, so it wasn't accessible and they didn't even take that into consideration. Now that's the navigation that was left for our little team. Aside from those neat and cool branding elements, it was implemented based on these folks' ideas that they had seen online and what fit their image of what that navigation could be like. And then they kind of slapped the brand colors on it and called it a day. So here's this business trying to sell product to people. And here's the people going to the website wanting to buy the product, but they can't navigate to any product category from that main page. And it turns out that if people can't find your products on your website, it's hard to sell them those products. So this is an example of the major problems with the bad design echo chamber. Bad design isn't going to serve your business or your users. So then the question becomes, how do you make sure that you're doing good design or even better design? You have to verify that it's good design. And that seems pretty basic, right? Surely the stakeholders that came up with that other navigation, they didn't say, I'm going to sign off on a navigation that prevents customers from seeing the product on our website, right? The head of marketing and head of sales didn't say that. But from where they were sitting, it seemed like a great design. It was lovely. It had this cool animated UI. And, it had some cool branding elements. So how could that be a bad design? It was both a result of and a contributor to the bad design echo chamber. So now back to this. How do you make sure that you are doing good design or better design? You have to verify it. You have to check and make sure it's not bad. Nobody verified that navigation. So we're going to quickly go through these 4 questions, and these are steps that you can take with your team. And it's really best to sort of bake these types of critical thinking skills into your team's design process as much as you can. So first, you're going to ask yourself if this design is really aligned with your users' goals. Who are your users? And there are lots of ways to ask this question and to make sure that you are having that empathy with your users. Perhaps you're going to do usability testing. Every semester with my students, we do a small usability test. And every single semester, at least one person has this realization that it actually didn't matter how cool their design looked or how much they really liked their design. If the design doesn't work for their users, it's not a good design. And that feels great as a teacher to see them, get to learn that. But we need to always keep this in mind as UX designers. And we know that we can't always do usability testing due to limited resources, right? So we can find other lower lift ways to check and see if our new design is aligned with our actual users. So that's sort of, the bad navigation that I mentioned earlier. I don't know exactly where it came from, and I don't want to blame Dribbble since I don't know that it was their fault. But I do know that if you use something as simple as a user story, right? As a type of user, I want something so that some goal, right? We should all be pretty familiar with that sort of format, right? So if you use that user story and you say, as a person shopping on this website, I want to be able to navigate to the right category of product so that I can buy the product that fits me. If we had looked at that super broad generalization of a user story, we still would have seen that navigation didn't allow the user to achieve that goal. So in the bad design echo chamber, when we're social proofing our designs and when we're using designs that are created for someone else to accomplish some other goal and plugging them in to try to solve our users' problems, it generally won't work. So write user stories, build up a research practice, but make sure that empathy with your users is somewhere on your checklist before you hand off designs to your development team. Okay, so now what about that development team? You've got to be aware of your team's ability to implement the design. And this is something else that I think a lot of teams seem to overlook when we're in a rush or when we're overloaded with work or when we have some cool animation that we can't wait to see implemented, right? And I want to be clear here that when I'm talking about the team's capabilities, I'm not really referring to the skills of the team, but also to what is your tech stack and how much tech debt do you have and what will that allow for? And what's the capacity that the team has to do this? And what sort of scope does this work need to fit into, right? So there are a lot of moving pieces on a team, and the more transparency we have, the better for the whole team. So this example of the navigation, I was asked to fix this. And there was this amazing product manager, and she showed me some data about how when folks navigated to a product page, they were twice as likely to buy a product. So that's cool. We've got to get people to navigate to a product page, right? So I went off to design a new navigation that was going to get people on product pages. Now, looking at this old nav with this cool animation and this fun UI, I was thinking it needed to be really slick, right? We don't want to lose all that cool stuff. We should probably keep all these fun branding elements. So I spent a week going down a rabbit hole and came up with this better navigation. I talked to marketing, I talked to the C-suite, I talked to product, and everyone agreed this new navigation was awesome. This was going to solve all of our problems. And then I showed it to the development team. And they said that they would have to spend a full 2-week sprint on it. There was a lot of technical debt involved. We had a really tiny team, and we sure didn't have a full sprint to rebuild this navigation. So my really cool new nav that I designed for our users, well, it was bad. It needed to be good or at least better, and it can't be anything if our team can't fit it into their scope to build it. So now what? Well, this team and I had a 30-minute brainstorming session, the devs, the PM, me, and we came up with a compromise that they could build in 2 hours. If I had brought them into the process sooner, we could have had our new navigation built days earlier. We got a quick sign off from all the other stakeholders, and we had the new navigation by the end of the week. So yay, that's a win, right? That was a better design, and we got out of that sort of bad design loop, right? A great way to be aware of your team's capabilities is to not do what I did. It's to show your designs early and often. Let product development and any other stakeholders see what you're working on. Give them a window into your process and into your progress all of the time. Get feedback. Maybe you can find a way to compromise with your developers or with the product team to help everyone find success. Some ways that I've done this are holding bi-weekly design office hours. In the before times when we were in offices, I would just kind of hang out in a conference room and let people know they could stop in and ask questions or see what I'm working on. In a remote world, I've done this by just kind of messaging the team on Slack that it's design happy hour and I'm hanging out in this Zoom over here. And in both of those cases, someone always shows up. Another way is to just ask folks, if you go to your stand-up meetings, just ask folks if anybody has time to hang out after stand-up, like a couple times a week. Just say, hey, anybody have 5 minutes to hang out after stand-up, and look at what I'm working on and give me feedback on this to make sure that I'm not going down this rabbit hole for a week, wasting our time and resources on a navigation that we don't have time to build, right? So show your work early and often. Make sure your team has the capability and capacity to build the design, and always remember that our work is teamwork, and you can't win without your team. Okay, so you've checked that this design is actually for your users. You've checked that your team is capable and maybe even interested in building this design. So now we need to know if it's accessible, right? So here it is, 2021, reminding people that accessibility checks are a thing. There are a lot of resources available online if your team doesn't have an accessibility expert, but please remember that every design really must pass this test. You can use a design kit with accessibility built into your UI elements, and there are lots of ways to make sure that you are, crossing this bridge and having accessible designs. But not every library has accessibility in mind. So if you're choosing a library or a set of design resources, before you start implementing any of those, check their accessibility ratings. If you're building your own design library, which I really love doing, but if you're doing that, make it clear to the developers and to everyone on the team that you want to include accessibility and build it into the library. Build a storybook version of the design library so that you can easily collaborate with devs and speak the same language with them in terms of keeping the design consistent and accessible. So in this navigation example, when the dev team and I found that compromise, it was part of a library of plugins that did include accessible elements for screen readers. Guess what? It didn't have that fancy animation. And literally no one cared. No one cared because it worked and we could build it and it was meant for our users. So, be willing to compromise and make sure that you're baking as much accessibility as you can into your design work every day. Now, our last question that we're going to ask is how are we going to measure success for this design? And I think it's always really important to be clear with your success metrics. That simple user story that we talked about before, that's one real easy way to do this, right? As a type of user, I want something so that some goal. And with my example, even if we had that really vague user story, as somebody shopping on the website, I want to be able to navigate to the right category of product so I can buy the product that fits me. If we had looked at that user story, we would have seen that the user probably couldn't achieve their goal with that old navigation, right? And so that's one way to sort of define a success metric. Can the user meet their goal, right? In this case, fortunately, I was working, like I said, with this really awesome product manager, and we had a clear success metric. We wanted to increase interaction with the navigation and increase interaction with associated product page views, right? Like we want to sell more product, right? But we spelled out specifically how we wanted to get people to product pages. And this compromise design that I created with the product manager and with the development team, it was able to drive that engagement and pump up the numbers in the way that we were looking for. So make sure that you keep your focus on what matters to the users. And it's probably never going to be that cool UI animation, but you're probably going to be able to get there and if you have that focus on what matters to your users and you build that into these success metrics, it's really going to set you up for meeting your goals. So if you don't want to do this sort of small scale, like this navigation example and doing success metrics through user stories, you can also take a step back and think more globally about your product and what its overall success would mean to users, right? You know, in e-commerce, it's a little bit more straightforward maybe, but with some of the products that most of us are working on, it might be a little bit more big picture. Like we can really change the way people work and change the way that they are defining their careers through the products that we're designing for, right? So if you want to take those steps back, look at that big picture, and then start, you know, stepping that up to the piece of work that you have in front of you, and make sure that all the design work you're doing day to day is aligned with those larger success metrics and goals. Okay, so now we've reviewed what the bad design echo chamber is, why it's a problem, and 4 questions that we can ask to escape the echo chamber. So the really great part about these 4 questions is that you can use the same ones to verify that the design that you're working for is good, or that it's better than what came before. You'll know it's good for your users, that it can be built by your team, that it's accessible, and that it's going to allow you to achieve that success in your metrics. Okay, so that's what I have for tonight on escaping the bad design echo chamber. Thanks so much for your time, and thanks again for everyone showing up, and to PhillyCHI for hosting. I'm happy to answer any questions that folks have.
Thank you so much, Christine, sorry about that. We have one question in the Q&A. Did having your design hours help, and did it do what you hoped it would do?
Yes, it definitely helped. I don't know that it did what I hoped it would do. I think it actually wound up doing something else. And it just really helped me become embedded in the teams that I was working with when we had design office hours. I would wind up with people from the C-suite, people from marketing, people from customer success coming to me and saying, here's a problem, how can we solve it? And that was really amazing. I think what I thought would happen would be that I would show designs to developers and get feedback more. And since that wasn't happening, that's when I started asking developers to hang out after stand-up, because you really do need to get some input from them. And I always find that developers are the best at pointing out, you know, like one-off edge use cases. But design office hours have always been really successful and a powerful way to, you know, let your team know that you're there to support them and help solve their problems.
Wonderful, thank you. How are success metrics created? I feel like it can be business driven, usability driven, etc.
Yeah, it absolutely can be. You know, as I said, you might have success metrics that are for your whole product, right? And you might think of something like OKRs might have some success metrics built into them. And you want to make sure that the small piece of work that you're doing, rebuilding a navigation, is aligned with that. But I think it's really helpful also to define success for each individual piece of work. So when I'm working with a PM and they say, hey, I want you to redesign this dashboard, you know, I say, well, how are we defining success for this? Like, are we looking for a 5% reduction in calls to customer success about the dashboard? Is that our success metric? So have something and make sure it's something that you can measure, so you can tell if you made it better or worse with whatever you did. And then, you know, you've at least drawn a line in the sand and you're able to, you know, pivot, keep moving forward, do that iterative design practice.
Wonderful, thank you. We are getting a lot of questions floating in right now. So I'm going to do 1 or 2 more because I want to be conscious of everybody's time, because we did tell people this would end at 8. Do you think competition analysis gets people off track? So maybe competition analysis should be done after user interviews and usability testing.
Yeah, I don't think proper competitor analysis and research send people down the wrong path. What I see happen is cases like this, where an e-commerce company took a navigation from somewhere on the internet that was not an e-commerce navigation, and they put, you know, a square peg in a round hole, and it really didn't work. But what I see in other cases, and what I've seen at other organizations, is someone like, you know, a product manager wants to solve something with a modal. And so they go and they say, oh, Zillow has this great modal. Well, if our company isn't real estate, you know, I don't know how great Zillow's modal is, right? It has nothing to do with us. And I think that's more of where people get off track. But I think you can still do very valuable competitor research. But I think it's, you know, if, you know, one of my students right now, she asked me today, should I do dark mode on my designs? 90% of my competitors have light mode. And I was like, well, you know, you're not testing the difference between light and dark mode. You're testing your product page. So if 90% of your competitors have light mode, let's assume that some of them did that analysis for you, right?
Yeah, wonderful point. Last one, have you heard of Google Heart Framework? Have you used it?
I have heard of it. I have not used it. And I think that it is one way of, you know, how you could define success. But I think that you really need to look deep at your own product and the space that you're working in. And I feel like frameworks like that might not have the nuance that we really all need to do the work, you know, to the best of our abilities. I think there's a lot of options out there. I wouldn't promote one over another.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Christine. I'm going to pass it back over to Ben to do some wrap up. Thank you again to all of our wonderful speakers for joining us tonight.
Awesome. Okay. Hi, everybody. Thanks for sticking around to the end. Just got a couple quick announcements. Really just one. It's the winners. So we have these 3 great books from Rosenfeld that we're giving away as raffle prizes, as is tradition here at PhillyCHI. And the first book, A Web for Everyone, will be going to Winnie Chin. Second book, Designing Agentive Technology, is going to Robert White. And Lizzie Klump has won Design is the Problem. So congratulations to all the winners. Great choices here, Remi. I think this aligns really well with the topics tonight.
I try.
Cool. So that's really it. Thank you all for being here. We hope you enjoyed tonight's talks. I want to give another thank you to Rahul, Dan, and Christine for sharing your knowledge with the community tonight. I learned a lot and have a lot to think about. I want to give one more shout out to our event sponsor, Bressler Group and Delve, as well as our annual sponsors, and to all of you for sticking out to the end tonight and for showing up on this interesting fall night.
We hope to see some of you guys in person at the holiday party next month.
Yes.
If you feel comfortable.
Those details will be coming out very shortly, and we're really looking forward to seeing some of you in person. Yes. So until then, have a great night, stay connected, and we'll talk to you soon. Thanks a lot, everybody.
Bye, everyone.